Good afternoon, and welcome to the National Invasive Species Awareness Week webinar series hosted by the Southern IPM Center and sponsored by the University of Florida, Texas AgriLife Extension, Auburn University, and University of Georgia Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. Today we are proud to present Ken Joeli, and he is going to be presenting on air potato biological control extension needs assessment.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to come and talk this afternoon about this. I am with the air potato biological control team here in South Florida, sunny South Florida. I guess we're the only ones that are above 70 degrees in most of the U.S. at least. So during the next half hour or so, we're going to be talking about this project dealing with biological control of one of our worst invasive species that we have here in Florida. It's not only in South Florida where I am, but it's found pretty much throughout all of Florida. So I will show my screen here. Today's date is February 24th, and the topics that I'll be presenting on today are the biology of air potato, biological control agents that we're looking at and using, the extension needs assessment methodology, distribution channels, survey instruments, the results of the needs assessment, and the air potato biological control website that's been developed to support the program. Well, what is air potato? It's an invasive plant here in South Florida. It's native to tropical Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. It was brought to the Americas from Africa during the slave trade, and it was introduced to Florida in 1905. It is a member of the yam family. We actually have 6 or 7 members of the yam family that are found here. Yams are cultivated for their edible underground tubers in West Africa. However, uncultivated species such as air potato are generally bitter and sometimes poisonous. So that is a question we often get, is air potato edible? And we're not recommending it, let's put it that way. Air potato is found throughout Florida, and it tends to invade a large variety of habitats, including pine flatwoods, communities, and hardwood hammocks. It is on the Florida noxious weed list, but not the federal or state prohibited list. The vines reach up into mature tree canopies and just choke them out. When you get air potato, you get a lot of it. And it reproduces by something called a bubule, which are basically like aerial tubers. They look like potatoes. And even small bubules will produce new vines. This is an example of what an infestation would look like. And I've actually been to some nature preserves in Florida where, where we would have had natural habitat, a nice hardwood hammock with a variety of tree canopies, up above us, mid-story plants, and then herbaceous plants. And air potato kind of took over and disrupted that entire dynamic. And these are the potatoes. This is an aerial bubule, and this is one of the smaller ones. One of the characteristics of this plant, you can see that it has a very waxy leaf, and that's one of the characteristics that help people identify this plant. It's the waxiness of its leaf. And more than likely, you're going to be seeing these aerial bubules on them as well. And they do produce quite a few of them. These bubules mature on the tree, on the vine, and then when they get large enough, they drop to the ground, and new air potatoes sprout from it. And this is a small one. You can see where it's coming out from the plant node, or the leaf node. And this is what mature ones look like. I'm going to exit my presentation and go to my video mode here. And I went out and I actually harvested a few air potatoes. We have some growing here on the extension office property, and you can see, it looks like about the size of the baseball. I have actually seen some that were larger than the softball size, grapefruit size, and some of them get to be, pretty large compared to some smaller ones like this, which might be about the size of a quarter. It might be hard to judge perspective on this camera, but trust me, this is the baseball size, and this is about the size of a ping pong, or maybe about the size of a quarter. So they drop off the vine, let me go back to full screen mode here. They drop off the vine and then sprout. And the leaf litter accumulates on top of it, and the plant itself produces these underground tubers, which could be dug up afterwards. So there are actually places around Florida where they have, instead of potato sack races, they have air potato sack races. They encourage people to go out and actually harvest air potatoes during some events. And you can walk around wherever the vine is found and see these aerial bugles that have fallen from the vine and just pick them up. But you might need to get a rake to actually find the ones that are the tubers that are starting to produce roots in the ground. So this project that I'm working with, it's a combination of multi-agencies that we have here in Florida. It's USDA ARS, USDA APHIS, the Florida Department of Agriculture, University of Florida IFAS, and then the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and they're all program sponsors for our biological control program. So how does biological control work? And my colleague Bill Overholt has a handy little graphic that he produced in Adobe PDF. So essentially you have a plant that came from somewhere else outside of Florida, more than likely outside of the US, and in its native territory, it may or may not be a problem. And then it's brought here to Florida through cultivation, through, in this case, as slave food. It could be brought in as a potential ornamental plant. And when it's introduced to Florida, those natural enemies that would keep those plants in control and in check in the native territory might not be found in Florida, in the invaded area. So the goal of biological control is to send scientists abroad to the origin where these invasive species, such as air potato, where they're naturally found, and start looking for natural enemies. It could be fungi, insects, things like that, that could be put through host specificity testing and then introduced to the invaded range. In my case, it would be Florida. So they do a lot of field work in the host, in the originating country. In this case, it would be Asia, and they would study the insects out in the field, and then they have to make sure that they're not toxic. We wouldn't want to introduce an insect or something that would be a problem here in Florida, and they also have to make sure that it's specific to that host plant. So in other words, the insect or pathogen that we're looking at introducing here in Florida cannot be harmful in any way, shape, or form to animals out there in the environment, and also cannot itself become a problem and damage especially closely related plants, commercially important plants, tree crops, things like that. So there's a whole range of host specificity tests that have to be done, and then those insects are brought into the U.S. under strict quarantine, and they're studied behind closed walls. People are not easily able to get back there unless you're a scientist and unless you have a viable reason for being there to study the insect. So we have the native home, the biological control that we're looking at, and then the invaded range. And what the goal is to introduce those approved biological control agents, the insects and fungi that we're looking at, introduce them to the invaded area, and they will reduce that pest population down to an acceptable level. It'll essentially give us an opportunity to catch up to the invasion and also to reduce the amount of herbicides and mechanical control that is needed. And keeping in mind that these insects are used, that the science has already proven that they're not going to be harmful on the environment that they're being introduced to. And essentially what we're doing is, before the case, we're having the invaded range, and then afterwards the invaded range with a high density of invasive plants, and then after the biological control is introduced, the plant population, the pest population, has been suppressed naturally by those insects. And the nice thing is, you know, in many cases, we can release the insects, and it produces a self-sustaining situation where a certain population density of biological control agents occurs, and nature essentially takes on the job of spreading the insects to other air potatoes. So we essentially inoculate a site, with the insects, and the insects establish and then move on their own. We never will probably be free of this invasive pest plant. Air potato is probably always going to be here in Florida. It's just how do we manage it best? How do we do it in a more sustainable, cost-effective manner with very little impacts on the environment? And that slide was courtesy of my colleague, Dr. Bill Overholt. So USDA ARS, Invasive Plant Research Service Laboratory in Fort Lauderdale, conducted the actual host specificity testing for the air potato leaf beetle. And the insect was found to be a specialist on air potato, and it will not complete development on any other plant found in Florida. It will damage the growing tip of the air potato vines, and will occasionally feed on those aerial bugles, those potatoes that we see clinging to the vine. Insect rearing and releases are being conducted currently by USDA, Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. So this insect starts out, of course, as an egg, and the females lay the egg on the underside of the air potato leaves. The female lays an average of about 1,800 eggs, and in some cases up to 4,300 eggs. After 4 days or so, the eggs hatch and larvae begin feeding in what we're calling an aggregation. And you can see some of the scarification on the leaves there that's caused by the larval stage of this insect. When fully grown, the larvae descend to the ground, where they produce an oral secretion and harden into a foam-like cocoon. And then before you know it, the adults emerge 12 to 16 days afterwards and can live up to 5 months or longer. This is a very attractive looking insect. It almost looks like a lady beetle, but without the spots on it. And the life cycle from egg to adult takes 30 days at 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Both adults and larvae feed on the foliage of the air potato. So you can see in this particular picture that they have actually chewed little holes in the leaf of the air potato. At the research stations where these are raised, where the insects are raised, they will do that in a very specific way. They have maturation chambers. They have places where they can control the light, the temperature, humidity, and they do quite a bit of work rearing the insects at our partner sites. Very often, though, what we find is that the insects themselves eat so many of the leaves that we have to move them around. And you can see what they've done. They skeletonize this air potato leaf. So the larvae have to be manually picked up and moved from one skeletonized leaf to another. And they do that so they can mature to the next stage where they actually form that cocoon. And eventually, the air potato leaf beetles emerge out as adults, and then we do the field releases. And this is Veronica Manrique. She's a former colleague of mine at the University of Florida in the Research and Education Center, and she's getting ready to release some air potato leaf beetles on that infestation behind her. And it's just simply a matter of taking the beetles and putting them on the leaves and letting nature take its course. And after a little while, you see that the plants themselves become skeletonized. And that is actually because the air potato leaf beetles are doing a pretty good job of chewing up those leaves. And you can see that it's not really impacting the leaf material around it, which is a little bit unfortunate because that's all invasive stuff around it as well, but of another species. So you see them release, and that's Eva Reese in the background. She's a Florida master naturalist working with Veronica, releasing air potato leaf beetles on our air potato vines. So we conducted the air potato biological control extension needs assessment to help us target our efforts best. And essentially we need to find out where we put our resources and our manpower when conducting educational outreach and distribution of the biological control agents. So what we did is conducted a Qualtrics needs assessment. It's the Qualtrics survey instrument that was used. determined the characteristics, needs, and priorities of the target audience. We analyzed the end user's perceived knowledge of air potato and the role of IPM, integrated pest management, and biological control in the plant's management. And then we analyzed the end user's preferred methods of obtaining information on air potato, IPM strategies, and determined types and numbers of educational resources currently being used by end users to manage air potato. So the survey methodology, we utilized the University of Florida's Qualtrics survey instrument. It's free of charge to faculty members. It's a lot more sophisticated than a simple 10-question survey monkey, and enabled us to do piping of questions based on prior responses. A focus group consisting of 27 Florida master naturalists completed the assessment 1 week before the statewide distribution. We did that just to make sure that any of the bugs, pardon the pun, we need to make sure that any of the bugs were worked out of the system before it was released statewide. And once it was released and being actually completed by survey takers, we could not change that survey, so we had to make sure we got it right the first time. We opened responses statewide September 22nd, 2014 through January 23rd, 2015, and it was distributed through networks within Extension, the Master Gardeners, Master Naturalists. We put out press releases. We worked with our CISMAs, that's the Cooperative Invasive Species Management Areas, the Florida Exotic Pest Plant Council, and other organizations. There was an informed consent. 636 people completed the consent, and 7 did not, and they were not able to complete the survey. Upon completion of the needs assessment, participants were immediately flashed to our project website. We did release, we did get some of the demographic and respondent characteristics, gender, racial background, and so forth were recorded in our survey. And we also asked people why people visited Florida's natural areas the most, and we had 595 people complete that question, and the majority of people said that they were there simply to get in touch with nature. So we had some sort of a personal reason why they were wanting to decompress and getting out into nature, and then 22% of the people said that they wanted to do it to take a nature hike. The survey did reach the entire state of Florida. We had a little bit of weakness of the northwest section of Florida. I did try to expand our survey outreach out there, but for the most part, it was pretty evenly distributed throughout Florida, with a slight bit of weakness up in the northwest. Demographics continued. University of Florida Master Gardeners were the heaviest survey respondents, but we also had, secondly, no involvement with UF-IFAS. There were people that had no connection to us at all, and that was very useful for us because we wanted to see if there was some way that they were using our information without us knowing it and without maybe them even realizing that they're interacting with Extension. We did define levels of knowledge. We wanted to find out the basic level of knowledge that people came into the survey with, and we had broken out by expert, experienced, immediate, advanced, beginner, and novice, and all 5 of those stages were defined, so it made it very easy for people to determine where they fit into that paradigm. And this was something that we decided to do after that initial focus group started taking the survey. We decided we need a little bit more clarification based on some feedback that we received from the Master Naturalist focus group that took it beforehand. And we found that a considerable amount of people, 28% of the people, were novices. They did not really have much understanding at all of air potato. We had some people that had no air potato knowledge at all, and that was 12%. 20% of the people were advanced beginners. Intermediate was 20%, followed by experienced at 16%, and then expert is 4%. And the expert range would be somebody who would be synthesizing the knowledge. They might be conducting research. They might be doing biological control work, writing publications, and things like that. We also wanted to find out if they perceived of air potato as a problem in Florida, and 99% of the people who took the survey, that was 586 people, did say that yes, air potato was a problem in Florida. So that has sunk into the collective consciousness of the residents in the state of Florida who took our survey. When we get down to the specific counties, we said 92%, we found out 92% felt as if air potato was indeed a problem in their specific counties. But when we go down to the natural areas that they visit the most, only 60% felt as if, yes, it was, in fact, a problem in the natural area that they interact with the most. So when asked, do you know who's responsible for managing air potato in natural areas you visit the most? Most people said no. They did not know who was responsible. Some people said yes, but it was somebody other than them. And then the least number of people said that they themselves are involved in the management of air potato on the natural areas that they visit the most. People who answered yes in the previous question were then asked about the primary methods of air potato management that are used. Harvesting was number one, and people probably have heard of the air potato roundups and things like that that are going on. By the way, it's a very effective way of managing air potato. But if you miss one viewpool on the ground, even a small one, you've got air potato fine coming back the next year. We had, secondly, a lot of people saying that they don't know how air potato is managed. And then herbicides were the third most common way of managing air potato. When people use descriptors for the mechanical and cultural control, they essentially said people were pulling out the air potato, they dug them up, they harvested them, hand pulling, picking up potatoes. People really understood what mechanical and cultural control was. When we asked them what their preferred method of managing air potatoes was, we were surprised, I was surprised. Beneficial insects were the number one method of managing air potato. They would hope that there is a biological control, a natural enemy, an insect, that would help us control air potato. And people, secondly, selected integrated pest management. And I'm assuming that there's a relationship there, that people would think that their IPM plan would include beneficial insects. And then, of course, we know IPM is essentially whatever it takes to get the job done effectively. So when survey recipients were asked what they least and most likely were able to get their air potato management information, where they got it from, least likely was number one, local news. And that was a little bit interesting to me because we did have a few press releases and a few articles that were released on air potato management, and that generated quite a few phone calls to the people who are raising the insects. But number one, they did not want to rely on local news for that. Secondly, they were not looking at the licensed pesticide applicator for that information. And then third, internet and social media. When we asked them most likely, number one, the University of Florida IFAS Extension Office. And keep in mind that there were quite a few people who took the survey who were not connected to us in any way. So this was a pretty high number, and it surpassed the other choices there by quite a bit. People also said word of mouth and then internet and social media as the most likely ways that they would get air potato management information. Those 60 people were then, who selected internet and social media in the previous question, were then piped to another question. What internet and social media sources are you least and most likely to use to get your air potato management information? And the least likely was Twitter. And you know, I have found that also Twitter, you can put a lot of information out there, but I'm not sure if it's being used for technology transfer and extension. If I was a rock star, or if I was putting on concerts or something like that, or if I was some sort of politician or something, I might have more outreach with Twitter. But for right now, it just seems as if Twitter is not the way that people are looking for their internet and social media. And then they're also not looking at Facebook. Where they are looking, though, the most likely places they are looking to get their information is through web search engines like Google and Yahoo, MSN, AOL, all of those. Followed by Facebook, again, which is unusual because we just saw that people, I guess they either love it or hate it. And then the third most common place to go is the University of Florida Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants. How would you prefer to get the air potato management information? People did not want to get it from licensed applicators. For whatever reason, maybe it's a trust issue, I don't know what it is, but for some reason the people who were actually out there doing the actual management, the licensed applicators, they did not prefer getting the information from them. They did not prefer getting it from the local news, and they did not prefer getting it from word of mouth. They did prefer getting the information from the University of Florida Extension Office, from the Florida Department of Agriculture, and from internet and social media. We then asked, at the request of my colleagues at USDA, Department of Agriculture for the state of Florida, and the University of Florida, we asked them how comfortable people were when they were using biological control agents for air potato. And we found that the level of comfort was pretty high. Over 3/4 of the people felt very comfortable air potato leaf beetles as part of the biological control program. When we asked them what would increase their likelihood of using biological control, such as the air potato leaf beetle, we had 137 people complete this question. The #1 response that came back is documented safety of biological control. They wanted to make sure that it was safe to use, followed by research showing it is an environmentally friendly strategy to manage pests, and so forth. So we're able to draw some conclusions from the survey. People do perceive air potato as a problem in Florida. Survey participants were from throughout the state of Florida, including people that are and are not connected to the University of Florida IFAS programs. People either didn't know how air potato was managed, or they knew of harvesting and herbicides as primary methods. They preferred the use of IPM, integrated pest management, and biological control for their air potato management. They overwhelmingly rely on the University of Florida Extension for air potato information and prefer this source, followed closely by the Florida Department of Agriculture and social media. When using social media, they are most likely to use search engines such as Google and Yahoo. And people are already comfortable using biological control of air potato, and they would be more likely if they knew of the documented safety of biological control, and if they had access to information showing it was environmentally friendly strategy. So with that being said, we did develop an air potato biological control website. When you go to Google, Yahoo, MSN, etc., it is currently the #1 ranked site when you use the terms air potato biological control in that web search engine. And how did we do that? It wasn't just by mistake. We had a concerted effort to make it preeminent on the internet when we used those search terms. We created a website with depth of information on the topic. We co-seeded other websites. For example, we worked with the University of Florida Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants, and we basically just asked them to put a link to our biological control website on theirs. And to correspond with that, we went ahead and we put their website link on our website. So we co-seeded each other's websites with each other's links. We did use Twitter. We have Twitter and a common bit.ly available for partners on the site. And bit.ly is essentially a condensed and shortened version of the website URL, that website address. Our particular website has a very long website address, and when you're using something like Twitter, it only takes 140 or so characters, and most of our website address will take up a good chunk of that character limit that we have. So using bit.ly, essentially it just shortens that up to only a few letters. We also used a common QR code, and QR is a quick response code. And we made that available. Both the bit.ly and the QR code are available for the general public, and it's readily available for all of our partners working on the site. We also use HTML source tag, a meta tag, and we said air potato biological control. And the reason that's important is as the web crawlers, these web search engines, as they're crawling through the internet sites, they're caching, they're looking for meta tags. And we wanted them to look for specific meta tags, and in this case it was the air potato biological control. Now the way you see this is by going up to your website, your browser, and you go to source code, and you can see at the very top of the source code all that HTML gobbledygook that you see in there. You'll see where you can put a place in for source coding, and it essentially acts like a keyword. And in this case, we wanted the web browsers to look for air potato biological control. And then, of course, as people took the surveys, when they finished the survey, we automatically flashed them to our biological control website. So they finished it up, and then as soon as they were done with that, it was an instantaneous thing where they were sent to our website, and we were able to get a few hundred hits just doing that. During our first year, and mind you, it was only the website has only been in creation for probably half that year in 2014. We were able to generate 24,000 website visits in its first year of operation. And of course, we have some literature cited here. So let's take a look at the actual website that was created. And I have it favorited here. And we had a graphic artist help us with the banner header. For the most part, I put the skeleton of this website together. I am serving as the webmaster for this site. And then our program partners helped us with graphics, photos, and the actual content that went on the site. And we have information about how biological control works, including that graphic that I played earlier for you in this webinar. We have information there about identifying air potato, meet the air potato leaf beetle, news clips, video, audio, newspaper clips that are generated from this project, and of course how people can obtain air potato leaf beetles. All of our project website, or all of our project partners are listed on the site. And you can see on the one side, on your resources, you can see where I have seeded the University of Florida Center for Aquatic Plants. I have put their air potato website link there. We also have a photo library on that resource site. My extension office website is listed here, and that bit.ly is listed here. And if I push this bit.ly right now, and I'll do it, I'll push bit.ly, essentially what will happen, it'll send me right back to this website. So you can see how bit.ly is essentially a shortened, condensed version of the long website URL, the website address, so we don't have to take up as many characters as we would using the long site. And then we have that quick release, or that quick response code, the QR code, and these are free of charge. You can get a QR code reader off the internet. You can go and generate your own QR codes, and it doesn't cost anything. There are some that you have to pay money for, but there are plenty of free ones out there. And essentially all you do is you serve to the website you're looking for, and you tell your app to go ahead and generate the QR code, and then you email it to yourself as a graphic, as a JPEG, or as a GIF. And I went ahead and I placed that on our website so it's readily available for partners, people who are working with us on this project. Now you might be asking, why would that be helpful? And that is so they could put that QR code on posters and in presentation out talking about this. If we were going to do a poster presentation, we would all have a uniform QR code, and when somebody with a smartphone or an iPad or something finds our poster, all they have to do is just take a picture of that QR code, and they're automatically taken to our project website. And then all of our contact information is down below. Our contact information here, frequently asked questions, publications, and about this program. So that is our air potato program here in Florida. We're all proud of it. It's a very new program. And we'll close some of these links down. And I've got my picture going here. Are there any questions?
We do have some questions, and we have plenty of time for them. If anyone else has questions online, by all means, enter them in the question box at the bottom of the GoToWebinar control panel, or raise your hand and we will unmute your microphone. The first question we have is from Bill Overholt.
Yes.
How do you think that survey results would change if the respondents were selected randomly?
Well, it's hard to do that, and I actually had an opportunity to do that, but it was going to be for a fee, and we're working on a zero budget on the website. I would imagine that we got a pretty good sample from the results that we got back, and we were able to determine that people were not connected to us and things like that. But through the Qualtrics system, when the Qualtrics company that runs the survey system, when they saw that we had over 600 survey respondents, they were contacting me right away wanting to know if they could, for a fee, help us generate responses. And I very handily told them, no, we would love to, but we don't have any funds to do that. So it would be nice to be able to get a kind of a broader reach with this.
Okay. I had a question on, when you asked the question, was air potato an issue in Florida, in your county, and in the natural areas you're familiar with? How did their answers match up with the actual distribution of air potato and where the respondent was from?
Well, air potato is found throughout the state of Florida. I was not able to match up the respondent to the actual location where they responded from. Okay. The information was available, but with 600 and something people, it's hard to kind of meet out that, to kind of work your way through that detail of information. So we tried to get general information from that. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? I'm currently seeing none in the queue, and no one has their hand up.
Well, I want to thank you, Joe, for working with me on this project. I think it's great that we're able to do this for National Invasive Species Week. I don't know if you can see my screen. I'm going to flash my screen up really fast. Can you see my screen on my computer?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, that is, this is me right here, and I'm a member of the Python Patrol. I do a lot of work with invasive species, and not only plants but also animals. We're also working with coyotes and some other feral hogs and some other issues. So if there are people that have questions about invasive species in general, I'm sure that there's a way that they can get in touch with me after this webinar.
I see you wisely took the non-bitey end of the stick.
You think that's wise, but when you look at this this gentleman, unfortunately he passed away a few months ago, but he's got the head of this python pretty secure here. This end, if you look at what I'm holding down here, let's just say that when somebody is milking a python, it's not milk that's coming out. So you notice that I'm kind of holding it away from me, and everybody's kind of laughing in my direction. There's a reason for that, but we don't have to get into those details.
I see we still do not have any additional questions, so at this point I'm going to close the webinar. Thank you all for attending this webinar as part of National Invasive Species Awareness Week. The recording of this and the others will be available at youtube.com/Southern IPM Center.